Hello, and welcome back to another Max MSP tutorial. In this tutorial, I'm going to be breaking down my Max MSP patch that I used for my recent Modular on the Mall performance. This patch is a sampling patch. I'm using a little sample of a kalimba that I ran through my modular as my kind of starting material. I'm using Max's multi-channel functionality to kind of layer a bunch of those samples, but they're being cut up in slightly different ways, and some of them are pitched higher and some of them are pitched lower. So let's just kind of take a listen to how it sounds. I've got a multi-slider here that kind of controls the level of each sample. So here's sample number 1, sample number 2. These are all normal pitched samples. 3 and 4 are all normal pitched. I've got 2 that are higher pitched. And then I've got 4 that are an octave down. The higher pitched ones are just an octave up. So yeah, that's everything. We're running through a plugin called Hysteresis. Looks like this. It's pretty cool. It's like a glitch delay plugin. There's a filter, there's modulation, there's stuttering, there's delay. So cool plugin. Just kind of throwing it on the end there to give some. It's not just dry, I guess. I don't know. The meat of this patch, we've got the buffer here with the sound. Let's call it kalimba. We're using mc.2d.wave to play back our sound. So MC just means multi-channel. So we've got 10 of these objects, basically. The 2d.wave object is a very cool object. It takes a wave file or, an audio file. And depending on the number of rows, that's kind of how many chunks it splices the audio into. And then so you can play through the audio normally, or play through whatever chunk normally, linearly with the first input, but the second input crossfades between chunks. So, if you've got one chunk and you've got something on the first input, it just plays back the sample. But if you split it into 2 chunks, if you just use the first input, you're only going to get the first half of the sample. You have to use the other input to then crossfade between the 2 halves of the audio to be able to hear all of it. So then, the more chunks, the more stuff you can crossfade through. So, the cooler it sounds. So we've got 8 chunks. That's kind of what I have it loaded up as. If I go to 2 chunks, you can definitely hear how that affects the sound, and that there's less kind of stuttering going on. It's more, you hear more of the actual sample, I guess. And the higher amount of rows, the less of the actual sample you hear, and the more kind of granular this gets. I guess I'm going to explain kind of how I'm doing what I'm doing. I should also note that the samples are being played both forward and then reverse. So I have these phasers here, the mc.phaser tilde. So that's just a ramp from 0 to 1, at whatever frequency you specify in the argument. The @chans, all these things have @chans on them. That's just the number of channels that object is, handling. So this is all 10 channels. This is the phaser that's reading through the first inlet. So this is just going through whatever chunk linearly. And so I'm applying math to this. I'm subtracting 1, or I'm subtracting the phaser from 1 That's what this little exclamation mark means. Instead of just MC.minus tilde, I'm using MC.exclamation minus. So instead of subtracting 1 from the phaser output, I'm subtracting the phaser output from 1. And then I'm using a minimum object to compare both. And then I'm multiplying because that gives me a triangle wave, but the triangle wave only goes between 0 and 0.5, and I need between 0 and 1 for the input of the 2D.wave tilde. So I'm using a bunch of triangle waves to read through this buffer, both linearly and as well with the crossfading chunks. I'm using the length of the sample, which is 26 seconds here, and as well as the half and the quarter of that to get my sample playback times based on the amount of rows that I set. So my sample is always going to be played back at the right rate to be in tune and to sound good. And then, this is just, so this is the highest one, this is the regular one, and this is the lowest one. The sample is 26 seconds, so you're probably curious as to why the 26 is actually the higher one. Is because I'm transferring these saw waves into triangle waves, so I'm doubling their length. So actually this is faster. The 52 would be accurate because it has to read through it forward and then backwards, and I don't want it to do that faster than normal, if that makes sense. This is a lot of math I'm probably throwing at people that are interested in listening to this. But for you Max people, you're probably like, yeah, no shit. So this is kind of a tutorial, kind of just an explanation of what I did for a performance that I'm sure some people are interested in. So I hope you find it useful. I'm using these SIG objects to send the pitches to all the different phasers, the correct frequency for it to read the file at the correct pitch and everything. And then combining them, I'm using 4 for the regular pitch, 2 for the higher pitch, and 4 for the lower pitch. Combining them into 10 and then sending it all into the phasers. So that's what all that's doing. These SIGs are just saying, hey, start the sample from the beginning, 0, and end the sample at 26 seconds. The sample goes on, I think, probably a little bit longer than that, but I just wanted a nice even number to use, And then I'm doing some kind of random panning with the mc.rand object. The rand object kind of gives you random signals based on the frequency that you set. The faster the frequency, the faster the random signals will come. I've got it set pretty slow, so everything's just kind of panning like slowly around, which is cool. And then, this stuff is just interpreting the multi-slider and then translating that into the actual levels of everything. Because that requires math and coding and stuff. So yeah, it's not too complicated. It's just to make it performable, I'm just integrating the list that I get out from the multi-slider, indexing it, and then sending that off to all the different voices with the unpack and target. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed that patch explanation. I hope that made sense. And stay tuned for more. I'm trying to get back into Max MSP a little bit. I took a little bit of a break with Modular because I was feeling almost not limited enough by Max. It's that kind of blank paper conundrum where you're just like, I can do anything, and thus I'm crippled by indecision because I can do anything and I don't know what I want to do. Whereas with Modular, you're kind of limited by the hardware and what modules are out there. I'm kind of interested in a hybrid approach, using the modular and then using Max to kind of do things that I would wish the modular would, if that makes sense. And I just miss fucking around in Max. So hopefully you'll be seeing more tutorials soon. Thanks for watching.